Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and for this episode, I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Wellington here in New Zealand by Corin Storkey. Thank you, Corin, so much for taking the time to be here and for sharing this beautiful conversation with me. And for everybody that doesn't know who Corin is, can you share a little bit more about you and what it is that you're bringing into this world?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Brian, for the intro. And thank you for having us as well. I'm really excited to be on this podcast. A big passion of mine is conscious living, conscious consuming, conscious thinking. And so it was really awesome to have you approach us to talk more about this. So I'm the co-founder and co-director of Selino Health. And we are a New Zealand social enterprise based between New Zealand and Peru that really has a mission to change the world, change the industry with regards to Peruvian medicinal plants. So Maca and Cacao are the two that we work with. And looking at understanding traditional uses of these plants, learning from the knowledge holders in Peru, the elders, the people that have ancestral experience with them, and then bringing it into the modern world through modern science, substantiating it through biochemistry, neurochemistry. We work here with universities in New Zealand like Victoria and Otago, which is where I come into things because I'm a scientist and a medicinal chemist. So yeah, and basically the goal is to bring conscious change and action to there's this, I don't like using the word superfood, but I'm going to say the superfood kind of industry, so that people have a greater understanding or connection to these plants and how to really incorporate them into the modern world with, ethically, sustainably, and socially responsible with reverence to where they came from.
Yes, so beautiful. And I want to touch on a few of those things that you mentioned a little bit deeper. But before we get into that, what was your journey with this? Like, how did you get into all of this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. As a scientist, I studied at Victoria University here in Wellington, and I ended up getting a PhD offered to go to Melbourne University. So most of my postgrad studies were in Australia, but I was born in Wellington, obviously, and I studied medicinal chemistry and got into postgraduate research in cardiometabolic health. Understanding inflammation, understanding, heart disease, lifestyle disease. And then I went into the world of the pharmaceutical industry. So it was quite interesting going from academia into industry and seeing how big pharma views health, and being a part of that. I was in the medical area of that, so it wasn't sort of quite sales focused, but just seeing, how health is a business for big pharma, and it was quite eye-opening working in that industry. Although the interesting thing on a personal journey, I had in my 20s, I'd had issues and struggled with chronic fatigue for quite a few years. I was on a sickness benefit and really incapacitated and unable to work. So even though I was a rational scientist working in these industries, I truly in my heart, I think, had a passion for natural health, because it's really what I believe saved me in my own personal journey. So it was kind of one of those contradictory, you're working in the industry, but don't really believe in the industry that you're in, but you see that there's potential in that industry to bring change, but there's a lot of barriers to that, obviously. And yeah, it was, it was a conflicting environment to be in. And And so I went on a holiday to Peru, just as a tourist, I wanted to travel South America. I felt this call to go to Peru. And there I met my beautiful wife, now wife, Sally. And she opened my eyes to a whole new world of everything, like looking at health, looking at connection to self, connection to the land, connection to my roots, ancestry, understanding that there's a lot more to health and happiness than what I already knew, like the pharmaceutical industry and Western health. And it was amazing because at the time I was in a bit of a rut in my life. I was on antidepressants. I felt, it'd been 7 years and I just felt like kind of empty inside. I felt disconnected. I felt like, what was my purpose in life? Mm-hmm. All of these things I think that we struggle with a lot, particularly, in your 30s, a lot of people get to this place of not feeling whole, I suppose. And and it was amazing. So she was feeding me this plant maca. I never heard of it. She kept putting it in my porridge in the mornings. And then I was, what is that weird taste? She goes, it's maca. It's the food of your brain. You need this for your brain. And this is what her parents had given her all throughout her life growing up. So she always looked at, health holistically, and there were foods that help certain things. And maca was a big one for mental health. And it was amazing. I felt within, I think, 3 to 4 weeks, I noticed changes in my physiology. And for me, being a scientist, like for me, that's, like I'm skeptical of things. It's not easy to get me to placebo on something. And I just little thing, like I felt like my energy was improving, my mood was improving, my libido improved massively. And that's something that on antidepressants I'd noticed had been an issue for a long period of time. And that's something that, I felt like that was a physiological change. That wasn't just an emotional, I wasn't just because I was in love, like that was something that and it really inspired me. So I said, I want to learn more. And she took me to the Andes, and I learned a lot from her people, her ancestors, her teachers, elders. And I went back to Australia, and I just felt like there was a reason I went to Peru, these plants had called me there. And and I kind of went crazy and quit my job, quit my career.
Wow.
And and just got on a plane with a suitcase and my surfboard and disappeared to Peru. And everyone thought that I had gone nuts, and they're like, oh, he'll be back in 6 months, And fast forward 7 years, and here I am in New Zealand, working in Salino Health that we created to share this beautiful knowledge with the world, because it changed me and my life. So I don't know, this is quite a long-winded intro, but hopefully you get the feel for it.
And that's beautiful. And I think that I think that there's a lot of people that can resonate with what you were saying in terms of being in a path that potentially there's something, like there's some noise and there's something that is not fully resonating, and to be able to find that spark or that thing that you feel like, oh wow, there's some answers here, and then how to navigate that and how to take. I think that having done this, I mean, from me, is the way I went from South America out.
You went the other way.
But it's like, like there's the idea of in a sense leaving almost everything behind, starting over, something completely new, and being able to explore that, which there's something within ourselves that is what is taking us to these places. And when we resonate with something, it's like, oh, there's something here. And I want to explore for a lot of people that are listening, and they might have never even heard of maca. Like there's still a lot of people that I met that have never heard of maca, and I've been having maca since I was a teenager. So it's been wonderful. Like it's one of the things that it's like it's every day on my smoothie. But for a lot of people that have never heard of it, can you explain for them a little bit more what's maca?
Yeah, interesting. It's actually a root vegetable. So this root is in Peru. You have the coastal region, you have the Andean region and the mountains, and then you have the Amazon. And each region has their own plants, their own foods, their own medicines. So this is from the Andean region where the Incan people came from, but it predates the Inca. It's pre-Incan. It's the Huanca and Pomposh people who originally cultivated this plant. So it goes back, 5,000 plus years. And it's a high altitude radish that grows only in this plateau mainly near Huancayo and Junin, around 4,000 meters above sea level. So in New Zealand, our highest peak is 3,900 Mount Cook, Aoraki. It's higher than that. So the farm that we work with is 4,000 meters above sea level. So if you're at this altitude, you only get half the oxygen of what you get at sea level. It's very different climate environment. So this radish grows up there, and they say it has special powers, special properties, which is true. It's a very powerful plant medicine, and they traditionally it takes about a year to grow the root. They rest the soil for 10 years after, when they rotate their crops around the mountains. And then, and then they sun dry it for 3 months, and they boil it into broths, or they'll macerate it in alcoholic solutions, and they'll drink those brews. And there's different colors of the root. They have different properties. And basically they say it's the food of the brain that promotes resilience, strength, and balance. So bringing equilibrium back to the body, and ensuring that you maintain equilibrium throughout your life with different stresses, being physical, chemical, emotional. So there's a lot of spiritual aspects to it. There's a lot of ceremony involved, pre-harvest, even ceremony in consuming it. There's ceremonies based on the calendar that they follow as well, the lunar calendar. So it's it's got a long history, and it's a very sacred plant to them. But in essence, it's a radish that they will, unique to this part, that they'll sun dry and then they brew it and consume it.
Yes, and I think that you just touched on something that I want to explore a little bit further, because there's these two different worlds that we're living in now, in that sense of, we have this spiritual world where, as you shared, like there's ceremonies, and there's the perspective that there's like these are magical, like super powerful plant medicines. And then there's this modern scientific world that now is actually starting to prove this, which, like, before there was no scientific research done perhaps on that. It's just more of the tradition and what is known from a different perspective. And I think that it's so amazing at this moment in time that we are able to get both things. Like, we are living in that, as you just said, like this spiritual world. Like, there's all of these ceremonies that are being done when at each step of the process, and at the same time, now we have some research done on these are the benefits of taking this. And can you share a little bit more on that side of things as well, for those that perhaps are more scientifically inclined?
Yeah, because I'm the same. Like, for me, I love the understanding the ceremonial aspect of it, the energetics of it, listening to the way the farmers talk about this side of things. But what sells me is the science and the experience of it. I mean, I experienced it first before I understood how it worked in my body. So as my initial research background was in natural products, so isolating out things from plants and figuring out, what are the molecules and how do they work, which is where I got excited, because I'm like, there's very little done on maca around this. The research is quite new. So there was a researcher we met in Peru, Jose Gonzalez, who's done a lot of research with animal models, human models, looking at the health benefits, showing significant improvement for hormonal balance in menopause, for example, with PMS, with fertility, benefits for stress hormones, adrenal hormones, libido is a big one they've studied a lot. So there's a lot of evidence out there to support its use in different things. But one of the big questions is, well, how is this plant working? And sometimes with plants, it's complex because there's a lot of molecules, there's a lot of things. It could be working in many different ways. But with maca, there's a really interesting thing is when we look at the way they prepare it, it tells us a lot of clues. Why would you take a radish, beautiful fresh radish out the soil, and not eat it straight from the garden? Why would you put it under the sun for 3 months and then macerate or boil it out? For me, that was intriguing. You know, there's something to that. And we did some biochemical mapping of this process, and we found that in those 3 months, we produce new biochemicals. So it's these Incan people were biochemists. They were manipulating the plant post-harvest. And what we found is that the molecules in maca are cannabinoids that are being produced. So related to the endocannabinoid system. And this is where it gets kind of interesting, because when we think of cannabinoids, we think cannabis, because cannabis contains, 120 different cannabinoids, and they work in different ways in our body, some directly on the receptors, some indirectly. And the endocannabinoid system is only 20, 30 years old, so there's little understanding currently of how it works, but we're building a map all the time. So a huge amount of cannabis research has shown us that we have different cannabinoid receptors and they do different things, and that we have different molecules that can interact with them. Some do it directly, some do it indirectly. So it turns out that in maca, we have 26 cannabinoids that are all made post-harvest. So it's not in the fresh plant, which is where it differs to cannabis, but those cannabinoids have different roles to play. They all work indirectly on our cannabinoid system. So none of them are psychoactive, like THC would be, for example. None of them have so the risk is a lot lower for things like dependency, which is what can happen with using high levels of direct cannabinoids than cannabis, for example. It's safer for everybody. And this is what people have told us, because they're using it for kids, for everyone, men, women, all ages in Peru. So we already knew that, but now we can show them why, because it contains indirect cannabinoids, not direct cannabinoids. And so what we are doing currently with our research here in New Zealand is we're mapping the cannabinoids in the different colors. We're mapping the cannabinoids in the different preparations, and we are investigating them now. The latest study we did was at Otago University. We're putting them through the cannabis models that they were using for cannabis oils. And we're seeing how they bind, if they bind to the receptors, how they work with anandamide, our main cannabinoid in the brain, and drawing parallels to all the research done. So we're piggybacking off the cannabis industry. Thank you very much for all of that hard work. But it's quite fascinating. We've shown already that there is they're called macamides, these molecules are classed. Some of them are as effective, if not more effective than, say, cannabidiol or CBD, which now globally is worth tens of millions of dollars mainly now in the pharmaceutical industry as a pharmaceutical agent. In New Zealand here, we sell it as a pharmaceutical, CBD isolate. So it's exciting, because I think there's a lot that we can learn and a lot more that we need to discover, but we can now draw the line and go, well, isn't it amazing what these people were able to figure out? They took a high altitude radish, they made it into a cannabinoid rich plant, and they were nourishing their endocannabinoid system using different cultivars, different colors, and we're now fully starting to understand and come to grips with that.
Yeah, I find it fascinating how all of these ancient wisdom traditions knew so much, and there was so much wisdom there, and so much wisdom as well on a much more holistic perspective. Like, this is one of the reasons why, for me, I've been drawn a lot to ancient wisdom traditions, because they have this approach that is taking into account all of the different layers of us as human beings, like the physical, the psychological, physiological, like the psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of that is taken into account. And it's a lot from me. I've been, for many years, since I was like a teenager, I was more interested in being well and staying well instead of having to take anything later on if I wasn't. So trying not to get to imbalances, trying not to get to inflammation. So staying in that place, and plant medicines like maca, it's so powerful. One of the things that I wanted to explore with you is as well, one of the other plant medicines that you are bringing with Seleno Health is cacao. And that is, I think that nowadays is starting to, at least here in New Zealand and other parts of the world, is starting to be something that is much more used, and it's used in ceremonies, it's used as a drink, it's used in so many different ways. And knowing a little bit, for me, with different ancient wisdom traditions, understanding like those traditions, understanding where they come from, honoring that, what are you seeing in this space? What's your experience with your understanding of the cacao, how it's used in Peru, how it's used in that honoring space, and how do you see it being used nowadays in this more modern world?
Really interesting question. And, this is a big debate at the moment, is what is a cacao ceremony and why are we doing these things everywhere? I mean, I am quite connected on Facebook to, conscious groups all around New Zealand, and you just see these things popping up every week now. There's 5 or 10 cacao ceremonies happening around New Zealand. And what is a cacao ceremony? Is it something that we invented in the West, or does this have deep-seated roots in ancient cultures? And I myself have learned a lot about this from Sally, my wife from Peru. So we have an online education training program now, Foundations of Cacao, in which we take people on this journey. And we brought this out last year, like towards the end of last year, because we just had so much interest from people here feeling a connection and wanting to know where to go with this. And what's interesting, like we talked about maca before, like you said, very few people know maca. Everyone in the world knows cacao. And the reason for this is cacao was taken in the 1600s by the Spanish to Europe, and they figured out that they could make it into chocolate. So they separated the fat and the cacao mass out, and then they started adding sugar and milk and things. And then it got spread around the entire world. So every single thing that tastes of chocolate has cacao in it. My first memory of my 3rd birthday, I remember eating a big piece of chocolate cake. So at 3 years old, I had my first, well, even probably pre-3, I had my first, but I remember this connection. So this is what's different, and what's interesting is we know this plant already. The whole world knows it, and we love it. But where does it come from? And what we're trying to do at Seleno Health, working with indigenous knowledge holders in Peru and Mexico, we have an amazing teacher we learned from Mexico, and with our farmers in Peru, is take people on the journey pre-Spanish influence, pre-European. Where did this plant actually originate, and how was it traditionally used? Because we've westernized it into chocolate, but let's go back now, because the whole cacao ceremony came from these cultures. And the journey of it, which is fascinating, starts in Peru. So we always think ceremonial cacao ceremony, Guatemala, Mexico, Yucatan, Central America, Olmec, Aztec, Mayan. But pre all of this, in the northern part of Peru, in Jaén, there's the Chinchipe tribe. We're the first tribe in the world that we know were using this plant in a ceremonial setting. There's a beautiful temple called Monte Grande, and this is a spiral-shaped temple. And in this temple, they found ceramic pieces with cacao residues, and they know that the Awajun tribe, who are the current-day descendants of Chinchipe, still practice traditional cacao ceremony. And they will tell you, and this is everything I'm telling you is from Sally, who's spent years researching this from her people, that their ancestors used cacao in a ceremonial setting in this temple, and we're talking 5,000 BC. So This predates all of the Central American use of cacao. So Peru was actually where it all started. And obviously all of these tribes back then there was no countries. So, it was one group of people, and it spread through the Americas up to Guatemala, and it got picked up by the Aztecs, the Mayans, and they share the same cosmovision. So we know that, they all learned from each other. So even though we say it started in what today is Peru, it's the same people. And it's fascinating. So in a traditional ceremony, cacao is very sacred as well. And it was, there's stories saying that cacao was given by the gods to the people. It's a very unique tree. It's a very unique plant. And there's a lot of spiritualism and symbolism behind it. But in a traditional ceremony, the plant would be harvested. It was always prepared by women in Peru. So women would prepare the cacao. They would either wash and ferment it, or they would wash and sun dry it. And then they would in some instances, toast it on what we call a comal, and this represents the fire element. So there's 5 elements in preparation, and then they would grind it on a stone grinder they call batan in Peru, or metate in Mexico, and into a liquor. So it's 50% fat, 50% solid, and as you grind it up, it becomes like a liquor, and that liquor hardens into a paste, which is what traditional ceremonial cacao paste is. So the women would grind it up, and the batan, there is a volcanic rock. So it also represents the earth element. It has 3 pillars underneath, and they represent masculine and feminine. And there's energetics involved in each of them. And then the cacao would be poured into what we call an icara bowl, or a wingo in Peru. And the icara is like a womb shape, so it represents the feminine. And then we have a traditional whisk, a wooden whisk. And they used to use the branch of the cacao tree, which is like a 5-pronged trident, and whisk the cacao, the branches are masculine. So there's like the representation of the phallus. Pour it into the water and boil or heat on the fire. And as you're whisking it, it starts to emulsify, and you create this foaming. And the foam is bubbles like air. And so they said that this is the breath of life. So cacao is a representation of the blood. And so we're taking the womb, the feminine, the phallus, the masculine, combining it with the blood, whisking it with pure intention and reverence, and then creating new life, and then sharing this within the community. And they would do it for celebrations, for harvest, for the lunar or solar calendar, depending if you're in the north or south. They would do it for special occasions, deaths, births, marriages, celebrations for connection. And so this is what the practice that these people have been using, and obviously now it's in Central America and Guatemala, Mexico as well. So we work with an Olmec descendant who's a teacher of cacao ceremony in the Yucatan, and we also work with knowledge holders in Peru who educate us on the Chinchipe tribes and people. And where it originated from. So it's definitely something that came from, the ancient practice. Yeah.
And when you see, as you're saying nowadays, there's all around, all of the time, these ceremonies. Do you feel like there's an element of potentially not knowing enough, not honoring the tradition? Cultural appropriation, do you see any of these elements, or do you see this as this is a positive thing?
I mean, there's pros and cons, and it depends on how we want to look at it. So obviously our modern day world is very different to the ancient world. So the way in which we run a ceremony is going to be different. But I think the big thing that our focus is on is ensuring that if people want to use cacao, that they have access to, firstly, a quality cacao source that has a traditional history and lineage behind it. It's very important. That's 100% traceable, that's organic, that comes direct from a farm. It's produced 100% by the community. There's reverence, there's love, there's intention. It's done with the highest honor to those people, and the money goes directly back to them. So this is a big thing. Secondly, we want people also to have access to knowledge and education around the traditions, because, like you say, cultural appropriation is something that's very important. And the analogy I would give is, if we were overseas somewhere, in Europe, and people had come to New Zealand and they went back to Europe and they decided they were going to teach Haka. Where are the lines with cultural appropriation with this? Because for these people, like, a cacao ceremony was a traditional practice from an indigenous culture. So if we have no connection to the cacao we're using, we have no understanding of the tribes that produce it or have worked with it, we have no understanding of the cosmovision of where it fits within the realms of their belief systems, we don't understand the symbols within it, like I talked about what is an ikara, what is a tate, why does it need to be made of volcanic rock, why does the whisk need to be used, why are we using stone ground, all of these things, like what is the representation of it? We don't understand any of that, then I would say we're probably not using it with cultural appropriation. And the reality is, for the beliefs of the indigenous people that we work with, is that to be initiated into running ceremony, it's something that has to be done face to face. So you can't do it in an online course. And so what we put together last year was an offering of, we'll give you a foundational level of knowledge that can fill all of those gaps, so that at least you understand what you're doing. And what we've found here in New Zealand is that as this thing's begun to boom, there are some people out there that truly are doing it with incredible intention, with reverence. They're all about absorbing and as much knowledge as possible, and trying their best to connect and educate. But then there are a lot of people out there doing it just for a show, for performance, to give people a cup of cacao. And so this is where I think it becomes grey, because that's not to say they can't use cacao, but should we be calling it a cacao ceremony? It's, I'm going to share a cup of hot cacao or hot chocolate, but eliminate the word of ceremonial in it, is what we would say, because if you don't have any training or connection or understanding or knowledge, then calling it cacao ceremony, ceremonial cacao, I would say is incorrect. Also, we've had a big debate about this, the origin of cacao. So if we believe, in the people in the Americas, the indigenous people believe that ceremonial cacao only comes from these tribes: Olmec, Mayan, Aztec, Chinchipe, Chavin, Central America. If you are producing cacao in, say, Africa, or Samoa, or somewhere else in the world, it would be considered cacao paste, like a block, but we wouldn't say it's ceremonial. Because it needs to have, it's like saying champagne is French, it's from Champagne, else it's sparkling wine. The debate of pisco, agua diente, I think they call it outside of Peru. Pisco is Peruvian. Well, yeah. Chile will argue that, but yeah.
I think that's that's a big thing, because I think that it's not that it cannot be used. It's just like when we are, in a sense, using a specific meaning of it? Are we actually honoring that? Are we knowing, like, this one of the things for me as well with a lot of my own path and my trainings, like I've studied Tibetan Buddhism traditions. I'm not Tibetan, and it's like, and so I know, like, I went and I learned and I did my trainings and I explored all of those traditions, and I honor them when I'm sharing something. But I'm also sharing from the fact that I'm not that, and I also honor that. And I think that it's so important to understand some of these subtleties of, like, yes, this is cacao, but it's not the same cacao from where these ceremonies are coming from, and to be able to understand, as you said, all of those different elements of the cosmovision, why certain things are being done in a certain way, and not just like, I'm just going to go and buy some chocolate, put it into some water or some milk, and just whisk it, and it's like, okay, like, done. It's about understanding that whole picture of where is it coming from. And I think that as well, like, for me as well nowadays, especially with cacao, that industry, the chocolate industry, is such a like controversial one in terms of, like, the trade and the conditions of how it's grown, who grows it, and all of that. I think that it's so important as well to know that who is actually growing it, like, who are being supported by doing it, where is it coming from, is it organic, is it fair trade, is it done in a way that actually is supportive of life and of the reverence of this plant.
And I'll give you some examples where we've seen issues with this in New Zealand. So, I've seen people running cacao ceremonies, and sometimes I ask just on Facebook, just curiously, I see you've got a cacao ceremony, but you in the event description, you don't mention anything about what cacao. I'm just curious what cacao. We've had people that don't even know which country their cacao comes from. We've had people that are buying through, big food importers here, have no connection to where it's from. They don't know the tribal affiliations of that cacao. They don't know the farm. There's no traceability. They don't understand. They've never even, been educated or taught. So there's a lot of these issues that we see coming up. And this is, again, where I would say this is cultural appropriation issue, where, we need those links and that connection. We just had our graduation for our first group that went through our cacao course on the weekend. And our graduation was a 3-hour discussion with our farmer in Peru. So he was on the farm talking to people about, these are the troubles that I face every day. This is my story. This is my passion. Here are my pods. It basically telling them everything about his journey. And we'd already shared that in the course, but it was firsthand. Thank you very much for being part of this. Thank you for helping bring my beautiful cacao to the world. And then, with our knowledge keepers from Mexico talking about what's important with the cacao ceremony. Here's my altar. Here's why I'm using these tools. Here's the way I view cacao. And that kind of knowledge is just gold, and this is why we set up this program, is because we want to create some kind of standard in New Zealand where if people want to be authentic and they want all of that knowledge behind them, it's there and it's available. And the second stage that we develop is the actual physical initiation in Peru. So this year in October, from the 12th to the 19th, we're going to bring people for a 7-day immersion where it's literally create your own pot, your own cacao paste on the farm with our farmer. So you go from that whole process of understanding every part of what's going on. And so next time you're back in New Zealand, you're sharing that cacao, you've done it. Like my hands have pulled these pods from the trees. I understand how much has gone into bringing this cacao, and then also learning the cosmovision, which I think is incredible. So understanding, the way the ancient people saw the world. We have currently do 2 types of cacao. We call the first one is the Amaru, which is based on the Incan an Amazonian cosmovision of from the Chicana, which is their symbol, explaining the world. And when we also have, so this represents Ukupacha, which is the underworld or the inner world. And the second one we launched was the Otorongo, which is the jaguar from the Kaipacha. So each cacao has its story. And so we explain where the world of Ukupacha comes from, the energetics, what it means, what are the symbols behind it. And when you're using that cacao, there's a specific use for that. And then what we also do is we substantiate it with biochemistry. So we created therapeutic profiles. So I take it in the lab and I look at all these classes of bioactives, and we basically say this cacao is for movement, dance, energetic expression, because it's of the ancient tradition, because it represents Ukupacha, and Ukupacha is this and that. And then I also say, and then we link it to biochemistry, because its theobromine levels are 265 mg per serve. It's got massive levels of polyphenols. It's got high levels of different indirect cannabinoids. And then we have the Kaipacha cacao, which you use for internal journeying, meditation, breath work, sound healing, embodiment, because of what Kaipacha represents in their cosmovision, but then also because its levels of phenylethylamine are off the charts. It's got tryptamine levels that are 10 times higher than any other cacao we measure. So in the course, like we teach them all of this, and we say that there's no such thing as one cacao for all. Like the Chavin people, who, when we created our Otorongo, this cacao was so different. And it's different because it's been cultivated differently by the Chavin tribe, who was different from the Chinchipe tribe. They were using it for shamanic initiation. They were combining it with San Pedro. And they did that because of the tryptamine levels in it. Well, they didn't know what tryptamine was, but because of the way it worked with their brain to produce DMT, and the synergy with San Pedro made perfect sense. So this is why this type of cacao was used. And so you see what I'm saying? Like we're like, without understanding the cosmovision, and this is why when I ask people, tell me about the cacao you're using in your ceremony, and all they know is, I'm just, it comes from Peru, or it's like, there's so much more to it than that though.
Yeah. And as you're saying, Corin, I think that it's so important, even just from a standpoint of like forgetting about all of that depth of knowledge and wisdom, even just from is this the one that I want to take because I'm going to do an ecstatic dance, or I'm going to want to go in and do some inner like connection journeying, and I want to spend the time at home and journaling or whatever. It's like, well, it really depends which one you're going to do, what to take. So I think that it's so important for people to be able to have an understanding and deepening their what they are actually doing. If they feel like they want to continue doing it, is as you're saying, is doing it in a way that it's honoring, and that it's also doing the right thing for the people that they are sharing it with.
Yeah. And I mean, we're the first company in the world to therapeutically profile ceremonial cacao. So on the back of our boxes now, like we have, like, what is the profile of this cacao? What properties is it going to give you based on the biochemistry, and what you should use it for? And no other company has done that. There are companies out there that tell you about properties, but it's not based on biochemistry. It's based on, I don't know, experience maybe, or so we're the first company in the world to do that, and we want to lead the way of, again, like bringing it into the West. Therapeutic profiling of cacao so that you can use it in the right way, knowing that it's come from this sacred background, I think is the best way we can fuse ancient knowledge and modern science. And this is what we feel is the reason why cacao called us into this, is to bring Sally's amazing ancestral knowledge and my science together so that these plants can move forward in line with the change of the changing world, and not You know, we don't want to lose the knowledge. We don't want to bastardize it like we do with everything in the West. Like, we need it to be done right. So as a company, we're leading the way with doing this. And this is when people say, what's the difference with your cacao? You know, that's it in a nutshell. Sometimes we have people go, oh, your cacao's a bit more expensive than other brands. And it's like, well, how long have you got for me to explain why? You know, like, this is conscious consuming. And if you're a conscious person, 100% this is the right thing for you. Not for everybody. Some people will just look at a price tag and that's the way they want to live their life. That's fine. You know, they're not our consumer.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that that's so important a lot of times to know and to understand as well. And it's like, not everything is for everyone. Not everyone is going to resonate with what we are sharing. And this is one of the reasons why I love, you know, like having these conversations, because as well, like everyone that is listening, like they can see like, oh, am I resonating with this? It's a very different story now, like them knowing everything that you have just shared, to go and buy like some cacao from they don't even know where, or going to buy your cacao that they know that everything that has gone into doing that, all of the research, all of the experience, all of the research, like all of this, well, that's what you're getting when you're getting this product. So I think that it's so incredible. I just know that, Corin, we are in the last moments for this conversation. So any last things that you would like to share with everyone listening?
No, I mean, you pretty much summed it up. Like, when we started this business, you know, Sally was working in a bank for 13 years. I was working in big pharma, you know, like, we both chose this mission to do something to bring change on both sides of the world. There's a beautiful Incan philosophy that, this idea they call Inkari. They said at some point, the Incan people were like, at some point the world is going to reach a point where it seems like there's no way forward for humanity. But at this point, the eagle and the condor will fly together. And the eagle is the new world, the modern world. The condor represents the ancient. And so we truly believe as a business and as people and as a family that, you know, like, we are at a crossroads where it may feel like we all want to go left or right and divide humanity and divide and go, we have to go back to the ancient, the modern world. But the reality is we have to find unification and middle ground. And this is why when we developed our business, we said that is our philosophy, is like, let's share this beautiful ancient knowledge, but do it and so that we can have it in our modern world. So yeah, if people want to learn more about what we're doing, you know, we run workshops all around the country. We have workshops coming up all throughout July, August, September. Come to Peru for our retreat. Sign up to our cacao. We do an online cacao training, like I talked about already, an online maca training, so you can deepen your knowledge. Yeah, and get on our website and start researching and connecting. And if you have any questions, email, message us, or come see us at festivals. We run a cacao sanctuary at festivals, and you can come and connect and enjoy cacao. Yeah, and become conscious consumers, become more conscious consumers. Yes. I think, yeah, this kind of podcast, if you're already listening to this podcast, you're probably already way on board with this. But yeah, we thank you so much for your time and sharing our story, because it really means a lot to help support the bigger picture.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for everything that you're doing. I think it's so important for me. A lot of this, the ancient wisdom tradition and the modern scientific worldview, I think that bringing them together and to be able to find more alignment, more balance instead of separation is so important for this moment in time, and allowing, like, I grew up knowing that the prophecy of the condor and the eagle line has so many different levels to look at it from, and I think that it's so wonderful. So if you're listening, and anything resonated, as Corin was just saying, go and check out their website. We'll have all of the links on the show notes so that it's easy to go there. But let us know as well if you're already doing or if you are consuming any of these like medicine plants. What's your experience like? Have you tried Selena's health ones? Have you checked them at any of the festivals? Just let us know your experience with it. And I hope that you learned something. And if, as Corin was saying, if you want to go deeper and learn more, go and check it out on their website. So thank you, Corin, once more for being with us. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
Cool. Thanks, Brian.
Cheers. Bye. Until the next one, everyone.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.